Welcome to State of the World. I'm Sally Lockwood. Today, I'm talking to former MI6 officer Christopher Steele on the Salisbury poisoning. So, Chris, the Salisbury Novichok poisoning report has been released in the UK. Tell us what you make of that. Obviously, it was the attempted murder of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury back in 2018 by Russian agents. Remind us what happened and the significance of this report.
So Sergei Skripal had been a Russian military intelligence GRU officer who had been recruited by SIS MI6 back in the past, had been caught effectively and imprisoned, and then was in 2010 exchanged as part of a spy swap with, if you remember, the Anna Chapman network that was so famous at the time. And then he was resettled in Salisbury thereafter, after 2010. And I think there was a degree of sort of assumption that because he'd been part of a spy swap, he wasn't threatened by the Russian state because they'd effectively blessed what had happened and the fact that he'd resettled in the UK. What went on in the interim, I don't really want to go there. I suspect things did. And the outcome of it was that there was a GRU operation to assassinate him and his daughter using a very dangerous chemical weapon, Novichok, in Salisbury in 2018, which failed, although some of the materials that were used, in particular this chemical substance in a perfume bottle, which presumably was the cover in which it was transported, was discarded, picked up by a local resident, given to his partner Dawn Sturgis, who sprayed it on herself as perfume and very quickly died. And one or two other people were seriously ill. So you're looking at a fatal operation, although ironically it was not Skripal that was killed, it was Dawn Sturgis.
And the Skripals, they survived miraculously. They're no longer living in the UK. They are living under a different identity somewhere else in the world. We've actually discussed this. I think you know where they're living now, but it's obviously not in the public domain for their own security. Do you think that the UK failed them?
What's happened here effectively is the rules of the game seem to have changed. The rules of the spy game, believe it or not, there are such rules. One of the questions that arises as a result of this, and we've seen it in America with the so-called Havana syndrome, if you remember that issue. And ironically or significantly, same people may be involved in this, the GRU, particularly a guy called Avaryanov, who is Deputy Secretary of the Russian Security Council and a senior GRU officer who seems to have been the one who was responsible for the planning of this operation and was also apparently behind what's called Havana syndrome, which is the use of sort of laser weapons against American diplomats in third countries. So what it tells us really is that the gloves are off. Russia is in a state of war with Ukraine, but it also considers itself pretty much in a state of war with NATO and with Western allies. And therefore the rules have changed and all the old assumptions about what was in bounds, out of bounds and all the rest of it need to be suspended. And it's no good trying to clear up after an operation like this. You have to deter it and prevent it happening in the first place. And that's the big criticism of this, I think, is that the sort of mindset of the security establishment hadn't moved forward to a position where the gloves were off and something like this was possible. And I have to say that, you know, the fact that Litvinenko had happened 12 years earlier doesn't really give them an excuse, because to me that was the big watershed in terms of the ground rules of espionage and statecraft. After that, things changed and should have been recognised as having changed.
Yeah, I mean, the UK has imposed even more sanctions against Russia since this report. How bad are relations between the UK and Russia? Are we already in a state of Cold War, proxy war? How bad have things got?
I think they've been bad for a long time, and that's partly because London became a sort of magnet for not only oligarchs' investments, but also dissidents, which Putin and others took great exception to. You remember Berezovsky in particular in the early years. And I think that now in particular, since Donald Trump's re-election in America, that Russia regards Britain as its foreign enemy number one. Previously, that was always the United States. But I think that's now been suspended, and Putin and others now regard Britain as the country that they want to target and hit the most, because that will deter other Western powers, France, Germany, Holland and others, from taking up aggressive stance against Russia, and particularly in the EU and elsewhere, and NATO. So I think that's where we are, and we have to be aware that Britain is the prime target now.
You know, for years, senior Kremlin figures, their kids were living in London, in Kensington, in swanky areas like that. Is that still the case?
I think it's much less the case than it used to be. It still hasn't gone entirely. And of course, that's one of the issues. There's been some recent statistics given out as to how many visas have been granted to Russians to travel to both Western European countries and the UK. And it's astonishingly high. It's in the hundreds of thousands, even during the war. And I have to say that I think our regime should be much tighter for all sorts of reasons. One, to make Russian elite aware of the price that they're paying as a result of letting this war continue. Secondly, because of the counterintelligence threat that all these visitors present to us. And thirdly, in general, because other countries will follow suit. I mean, one of the interesting things that I'm seeing at the moment, and I don't want to go into detail, is that the Chinese have suddenly become very interested in the Russian modus operandi and what the Russians are doing in Britain and other countries, because they are considering going down the same path themselves.
That's a scary prospect. Chris, do you think we could see direct conflict between Russia and the UK anytime soon?
I think we potentially could. I mean, one of the things is the degree to which the Russians believe the Article 5 guarantee of NATO and that America would abide by it. And I think that comes back to what I was saying earlier as to whether America is still a reliable ally. I think it's quite clear that America wouldn't honour Article 5 in relation to maybe the Baltic states and other Eastern European countries. But UK is its oldest and closest ally. I don't know. I think the jury's out. But I certainly think there's a threat that Russia will perceive the United States as not being an Article 5 ally of the UK, which might lead them to doing something particularly reckless that could lead to a conflict. I think it's possible, not probable, but I think we have to plan accordingly. We always have, in my world, we have to hope for the best and plan for the worst. And that's what the government needs to be getting on and doing here.
Chris, thank you. If you want to hear more conversations like this, please subscribe to State of the World. It's completely free and you'll see when my updates drop. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.